Dear God, please don't let me relapse and return to the evil that men do. Father God, I pray and ask that you help me to have mercy on others the same way
You were talking about, at LA County Jail and all the riots and stuff that was jumping off. So do you think that, because I know there's always like racial tension or a little like racial hostility between Hispanics and blacks. Do you think that might, like, did you start getting introduced to like racial,
having racial feelings towards
feelings and stuff?
So I never had that hatred or whatever you call it, because I didn't grow up gangbanging against blacks like a lot of neighborhoods.
Right.
And I think that's how it starts, because you're going at it in the streets with the opposite race, and naturally it becomes, it's almost like something that just happens, that grows, man, but I did grow up fighting blacks, even in the juvenile system and stuff like that. But I never had that, bro, and I'm glad I didn't, because some of the people that I was influenced by most are blacks, even like through music, bro. Like Tupac was a big influence on my life. He kind of woke me up to a lot of things just by him like saying certain things, you know what I'm saying, like Illuminati or like stuff like that. I started like researching. So he influenced me. I started reading books like Malcolm X, the Black Panthers. I started studying all that stuff. So I always had that respect for my black brothers, man. But as far as at the time, I think you can't avoid it. Right. When it's wartime, you gotta kind of shut that little whatever. If you have I'm not gonna say a soft side, but if you have that, like me, I've always been different. I try not to be a follower like that. Like, I'm not gonna hate someone because someone else does. But there was definitely a lot of homies that, right. They were just
right. And then it's kind of different, like you say, with each individual. To some individuals, it's business. And then to some individuals, it's personal. The enemy is the enemy, regardless of whoever he is. But then due to the fact that there's a racial overtone to it, some people will definitely, on both sides, black and Hispanic.
On both sides,
you have people who don't like the people because of the race, and then you have some people who just don't like him because he's the enemy and he happens to be a different color. Yeah.
So it all depends on the individual. Some people are racist, man. There's some racist Mexicans and there's some racist blacks, man. And there's racist everything.
Most definitely.
But the whole gang element, I think, kind of, and then not even the gang element, the living arrangements that we have in there, and then with the tension, with things jumping off, sometimes you just can't help it, because like I said, I've been in riots where I got stomped out, bro, like by blacks, but even then I didn't have like a hatred for blacks. But I ain't gonna lie, there was certain probably intervals in that walk where I was like, man, I can't stand these fools. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, it's real. It's understandable because, like you say, there's racists on both sides. Mm-hmm. I know blacks who say the same thing.
Yeah, same
so
thing.
It just all depends on the individual. So exactly. You say you have been in some riots where the Hispanics won, and then you've been in some riots where they lost, huh?
Yeah, bro. I mean, it depends where you're at. Numbers change, and sometimes numbers don't even matter because not everybody jumps.
Right.
And then one to go back to your question you asked me earlier. The last time I was in the county, it was cracking, man. It was cracking. One of the homies he did a drug deal with the black, and he ended up overdosing. It was some bad stuff. Uh-huh. And so that cracked off. The whole county was cracking because of that.
Right, okay.
And
so they felt like the blacks were responsible for his passing?
Yeah, well, they didn't want to, they said they were going to deal with it, but they kind of took too long.
Right.
And then the dude ended up getting rolled up. So they never had an opportunity to deal with it. Right. So it was like, kind of like took it personal and
right.
Just,
and I can understand, but in another way, I'm kind of looking at it like, unless he knew, how was the individual supposed to know that drugs is bad? So like you say, it's always a tricky situation. And then I notice anytime someone passes away, you're going to have people who love his loved ones, the people who care about him, in any type of situation, they're going to want some type of retribution. You know, whether
and in a sense, it was kind of his fault because he's not even supposed to be dealing with the blacks in that aspect. Because when it comes to drugs, you know, and that's why we never gambled with another race. Well, with blacks, that's why there's certain lines you don't cross.
Right.
Because if something bad goes wrong, it's not just going to be between two individuals. It's going to be everybody. And then people can lose their lives. And to avoid that, hey, you guys, you know what I mean? You do your thing here. We're going to do ours.
Right.
That doesn't mean we can't, you know what I mean? Share books and talk and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, man, it was a bad batch. And you're right. I mean, who knows if the dude even knew, or who knows?
Right. So you, sorry to cut you off. So you guys just have certain policies that limit certain dealings with blacks, and I definitely understand. I'm just trying to, for my viewers, I definitely understand.
Yeah, I'm speaking back then in those days. I don't know how it is now. It's 2022. But yeah, man. I mean, naturally, you ain't gonna. There's just certain things you don't do.
Right.
And there's reasons for it.
Right.
You know, what I mean, it's not like, oh, this is just a super politic that we just or we just want to. Nah, man. I mean, and that's on both sides. Right. It's a mutual agreement. Yeah, Mexicans might be more how do you say strict on it.
Okay, right.
But it goes both ways because you don't want to end up in a situation where something happens between two individuals and now you got everybody involved, and then something cracks off and somebody loses their life all because something you could have avoided.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's
right. No, most definitely, because it keeps the problem from turning into a bigger problem involving more individuals. And like you say, due to the fact that if any individual sees another one of his race fighting, he's going to jump in. So certain things limit that from potentially happening. And I definitely understand, and I believe I agree with it too. You know, because it definitely eliminates a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So let me ask you. So when was the first time you caught a case that was going to send you to prison? You know.
Well, the first time was when I told you in 1994 I was fighting a kidnap. And I fought it. I was gonna go to trial, and then they ended up dismissing the case. They dismissed it. They didn't have no witnesses. Witness didn't want to show up, and it was a bogus case, anyways, man. The dude was giving us a ride, and a gun came flying out the window. The cops were behind us. Gun comes flying out the window. They gaffle us up, take us to the station, and they scared the dude. Wasn't from the neighborhood. He used to kick it with us, and so the cops scared him. The sheriff scared him into saying that we kidnapped him. They said if you don't say that they kidnapped you, you're going to jail for that gun because that's your car. He was driving. He was a driver. So they scared him, and he went along with their story. So now we're in jail for kidnap, which was a bogus thing, and we ended up getting that case dismissed. And then about a month later, I ended up back in the county for a robbery. That was my first term, and I ended up in Delano State Prison, North Current State Prison, which is in Delano, December 5th, which is my wife's birthday. 1995 was my first day in prison. I had a J number.
And so what was that experience like, going to prison for the first time as a Sereno? Was it, I mean, did they tell you when you got to prison it was certain do's and don'ts, or did they already expect?
I was already laced up from the county. If you could go through that county, you know what I mean? I was already there for almost probably even a year. So once you go through those stages, you're already laced up for prison. Of course, there's little different things that might change depending on where you're at. But I was already knowing the game, you know what I'm saying? And I was ready.
So how is it, let me ask you this, how is it like when an individual has to be disciplined or DP'd and he needs a Sereno? Do certain guys volunteer for it, or under you guys' structure, or are you guys like called out to do it, or how does that work, or how did that work?
Well, it all depended on what kind of DP, like just something small. Sometimes some dudes will raise their hand, and sometimes it'll be like, hey, you and you, because of size, you know, because you could be a small dude and I can be a big dude and be like, oh, I want to do it, and like, nah, you ain't trying to break the dude, you know. You just need to check him.
Right.
So it all depends, and it all depends on the individual that's there, you know, saying what's what. So that's pretty much how that works, and now everybody does it. Back then, not everybody did that, and you wouldn't even hear about DPs a lot, like within the blacks, like in there.
Right.
Now it's more known and more, you know, familiarized, especially even out here. Now you hear about it on YouTube and all this stuff, but back then it was predominantly just Mexicans, man. You know, someone's always messing up, and someone always needs to get checked, you know.
Right. And so you was explaining or talking about that you guys is structure. So I know that from doing time and stuff, like you just mentioned earlier, the blacks, we're kind of loosely organized. You know, we don't necessarily have people who call shots or we're structured, but and so for you guys it's a bit different. So in each building you guys have someone who kind of like,
yeah, wherever there's homies, there's always gonna be, you know, someone that has to step up and keep things running smooth.
Right.
And that's on both sides. Now I mean, now it's different. Everybody has you know, blacks as well, you know. Usually there's probably two, one for the Bloods, one for the Crips, or just one dude, you know, OG usually speaking. And that's a good thing, you know, because there has to be order.
Right.
Otherwise it'd just be chaos, you know.
Right. Were you ever called upon to handle your business in there, or anything you can share with us?
As far as what?
Disciplining somebody or being.
Oh yeah, man. Man.
Can you tell us about maybe the first time you was in prison and had to DP somebody?
In prison? Oh yeah, actually in prison, man. Right when I got there, I actually ended up in the hole in reception center. They sent me to C Yard, and we ended up in a dorm living, and we ended up kicking off a riot with the Woods, with the whites. Ended up in the hole, D6, I believe, and man, we were constantly having to do something there. I remember it was funny. One of the, I don't know what it was. I can't even remember what it was, but there was a homie that was supposed to pretty much regulate, or DP they call it now. We used to call it regulate. He had to regulate his celly. His celly was a lot smaller, and he didn't do. They pretended like they did it. Right. They were way at the end, and they were flushing we were all flushing our toilets, but the guy that told them that they have to do it was watching the shadows, and he can see that there was no movement in the cell. So basically, it's like, say you were my cellie, and I had a DP or whatever, right? And I'm bigger and you're a smaller dude, so naturally you wouldn't need 2-3 dudes. You know, it was just him. And let's say I'm probably like, hey, they told me I got a DP, bro, but don't trip. You know what I mean? We're just gonna pretend. We're just gonna make some noise, and so that's what they did. Right. And he didn't do it. He ended up not doing it, and they found out. So now when we went to yard, we were in the hole. We have a little group yard. Now we had to DP both of them. Right. Oh, okay. You know what I'm saying? And so that was as far as in prison, yeah, that was the first time it was in the hole, and that's like right under the gunner. You know what I mean? You get mazed, and you gotta.
Let me ask you, because I understand, but you said so when they was pretending to do the DP, you guys was flushing your toilet.
Yeah,
explain the purpose of that.
That's to keep the noise level so that the cops can't hear the movement in the cell. Because you know, in the cell, especially in the prison setting, when someone's getting down in the cell, especially the doors right there were holes. I don't know how I could explain it, but it's like in Calipad or like in Pelican Bay. Right. The doors are holes. It's a door, but there's a bunch of like little holes. Right. So you can hear the noise easily outside the cell. So if someone's getting down, it's small in there, you can hear it. So the cops, the COs, the correction officers, they can hear it clearly. So to avoid them hearing it, we would flush our toilets and try to keep that sound, create a diversion, try to keep that sound level down. Have a lot of homies maybe start playing chess, start calling out numbers out on the tier loud, you know what I'm saying? There was little different things we used to do to.
Now, I know from doing time myself, at some point in time, you guys have alliances with the white guys, or which is known as the Woods, but then at sometimes you guys will also get into it with them. You had spoke earlier about that you were guys that had got into it with the Woods. Do you recall what that was about, and like how does that work? Sometimes you guys are allied with each other, and then sometimes you guys are into it.
Well, at that time, I honestly didn't have a lot of respect for the Woods at the time because they were still getting treated like crap in the county. No. So I was fresh from that. And that was my understanding of whites, right? Like, treat them like crap, you know?
Yeah.
And so, just being honest, you know, at the time, I don't no longer think like that, of course. But they were I didn't really have, my respect level for them wasn't too high. But to answer your question, yeah, I remember what it was. I remember one of them dudes was a snitch, and there was some paperwork that came in, and they didn't want to deal with the dude. And we kind of told them numerous times, hey, you guys got to take care of this dude. They didn't want to take care of it. And we told them, if you guys don't take care of it, then we're going to take care of all of you, you know. And so they didn't do it. So we took that as, all right, you know, and you know, we kicked it off, man. And next thing you know, we're in the hole, man. It was a pretty long riot, man. We got them pretty bad, man. You know, we had locks. We were in the dorm living.
Oh, okay.
We had locks. So we had, you know, the packs with the socks. You put the locks in the sock, get a couple socks, wrap it around your hand, and you know.
You can put in a lot of work with those now. So, you know, sometimes I get some questions asked to me pertaining to why do you, and of course I know you didn't set the rules in this and that, but why do you feel it's okay, I mean, or the policy was, it was at some point in time to, I know that you guys play basketball from time to time with the whites. And
it's more because of space. So usually there's two sides, and there's how many races? There's 3 main races, and then there's others, right? So we have to figure something out where, and I didn't set the rules, that's just the way it was, but just so people can understand, we have to split those sides. So blacks have they're usually aligned with Asians or others, or to better put that, the others align themselves with the blacks, and the whites naturally align themselves with the Mexicans because there's not always a lot of whites. So, and the paisas align themselves, of course, because that's same people, you know, Mexicans. And that's really more of a like I said, a program setting type of thing. Because like say there's only 2 basketball courts, or there's 2 sides. Like in prison, there's 2 day rooms. There's the prison, there's a building, and then you got 2 sides of the day room. One side's for the blacks, one side's for the Mexicans, and the whites, and then the Asians and the others go on the black side. And like you mentioned, I didn't set the rules, but naturally that's the way it would be. But as far as I don't think I answered your question. Yeah, there's been like alliances, and that might go way back, way before my time. And I didn't always agree with it, because like I said, at the time when I first started, I actually disliked the whites more than I disliked the blacks. You know, I was like, man, well, I didn't even like them being with us, you know what I mean? Like I kind of seen them because I seen that they wouldn't stand up for themselves in the county. So to me, I was like, man,
kind of lost respect for
them. I was like, what's up with these dudes, man? Like, I can't respect that. Like, they don't even stand up for themselves. Why am I gonna respect them here, you know? So that was just my little mentality. And that changed. A lot of that changed throughout the years. They started, you know, having their little respect, and we had a kind of like a hands-off policy on them. And even the paisas used to get treated bad back then.
And you know, I get asked this question a lot. So explain for those who don't know what are paisas.
A paisa is a Mexican, predominantly a Mexican, but it could be any Latin descent or Hispanic descent. El Salvador, Guatemalan, but usually Mexican. And what a paisa is a Mexican native from Mexico that gets arrested in California or in the United States, but that name we kind of it's stuck here in California, and it can be like my uncle, you know what I mean, or.
Right.
We're the same people.
Is it someone who is just a non-Sereno?
It's someone that's not a gang member, that's just a native, and they're just Mexican. Their race is Mexican, and they go to jail, and they have to align themselves with somebody, because that's just how it's set up in California.
Right.
There's factions, and that's just the way it is. So you're gonna either have to be a Sureño, a Norteño, or a Paisa.
Right. So is a Paisa and a Border Brother, is that the same thing?
Some people, that's another name, but they're not to be mistaken with the gang Border Brothers. There's a Border Brothers up north in Oakland called Border Brothers, and that's a whole different thing. But yeah, you would call them a Border Brothers. But the main name that people use is Paisas. Yeah. So
if a dude comes to prison and he's a Hispanic, but he's a non-affiliate, is he forced to participate under the Sereno structure? Like, is he forced to go on missions, or what's required of him? Is he allowed to?
Well, it depends if he runs, who he's running with. If he runs with the Paisas, then he's on the Paisa program.
Right.
But if he's not from nowhere, and it's what they would call a resident, he would fall up under with the homies, and yeah, you gotta be with the program. I mean, nobody's forced.
Right. So
do nothing.
Is he forced? Like, would he be forced, or his number called to go on if an individual had to be disciplined, and he's just a resident?
It all depends, man. You know what? It all depends. Me personally, I never like to kind of like say, hey, you gotta do this, but if you don't participate, that kind of stuff's frowned upon.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to that, it's a fine line. Even homies, you're not forced to do nothing, but at the same time, it's kind of frowned upon. Like it puts this it kind of taints you, because now you kind of look at that individual. If it cracks off with another race, I probably can't rely on that dude.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we need to be together. I need to know that you got my back. So if you ain't like participating, then you're gonna be like a non-factor, and most people they're not gonna respect that.
Right. So on this first term that you got busted on, how long did you end up doing?
The first term, I always did short terms. My first term, I only got 2 years. I maxed out on that. And then my next term, I got 2 years again. I think I maxed out on that.
So on your first term, once you've done all, you've done all the whole 2 years, and you went right back to the street. So you right back to the same stuff, gang banging, going to the prison.
Yeah, but now you got that little,
right.
I've been to prison, you know what I'm saying? You got the little extra pep in your step, and your mentality just changes, man.
But so going to prison, it didn't deter you from gang banging and hanging with the homies and none of that stuff?
Nah, all it did is this.
Just pumped you up, huh?
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's all it did. And
so how long were you out before you ended up catching another case?
I think 6 months, to be exact.
Wow.
And then I got buzzed. I got out from Calipatria in December 96, and I was back in prison. I was back in jail in the county, I think in June.
Right. So we hear a lot about Calipatria. That's a pretty notorious prison. What was it like down there?
That was probably the best prison I ever been to. And not to say that I'm speaking prison-wise,
right.
Comparing prisons. I've been to a lot of prisons, and that was probably the best prison I've been to, because at the time, the program was more solid and we were a lot more unified. There wasn't, nowadays it's like, it's so many people and so big, there's cars. Kind of like with the blacks, you got the Bloods, the Crips, but then between the Bloods and the Crips, like the Crips, you got the neighborhoods, you got the gangster car, you got all these different cars, the Long Beach car.
Right.
And then with us, you got the West Side, meaning LA, West LA, East LA, Southeast LA, SGV, San Fernando Valley, IE, San Diego, Orange County. You got all these different, and so me, I really dug it because I was kind of embraced back then. There wasn't that many like young guys like me. They were more like older homies, and it was just a certain love, man, and just a certain, it was just solid. And so the program, the way it ran, everything was on point, you know.
And that was Calipatria.
It was a level 4. Yeah, it was a 4 Sea Yard, and then they actually converted it to a level 3 while I was there, and then I ended up going home.
When you was down there, did anybody get, you know, because Calipatria is extremely notorious for violence. So did anybody get stabbed?
Oh yeah, fools were getting booked all the time, man.
That stands out in your mind.
One of the dudes that I drove up with, he went against the grain, man, and this dude was always into the whole politics stuff and always trying to speak up. And I already knew, like a lot of us knew, like this dude's, it's only a matter of time. And this dude got man, bad. They had to take him up in the chopper. Yeah, bro, it was an everyday, you know, not everyday thing, but there was always something cracking. And then they try to put Northerners in that yard, bro. And I'm pretty sure you're familiar, but there is no Northerners in these Southern yards.
Right.
There was no such thing as a Northerner walking these Southern yards.
Right.
They had their own, like, only certain yards, like Tracy, San Quentin. They had like their prisons, right? But as far as being down, so when they came, I don't know where it came, but they said, you know what, these guys are off limits. We're gonna let them program, you know. So a lot of us were mad, man. Like, what do you mean? Like,
so someone of the like the
yeah,
guys
you know,
in the upper echelon
kind of came down like, hey, you know, and I don't know what that was, you know.
Right.
Back then, I really didn't get involved with no politics.
Right.
I was just, I was fully activated, man. Like I just wanted it, you know.
Yeah.
But
so were they allowed?
It ended up cracking off though.
Oh, so
it ended up cracking off on the yard.
With the Norteños?
Yeah, and I was a porter, man. And I didn't get no. I remember when they first came in the building, bro, and they came in like kind of hard, bro. Like, you know what I mean?
They bring a bunch of them in?
Yeah, they brought in a whole, like, couple bus loads, and they put them all in our building.
Right.
So I was hot, you know what I mean? I was a youngster, and I was like, man, look at these fools, you know, and there was a couple like right off the top, like, man, if it cracks off, I want to get that one, like, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. And I remember when it cracked off on the yard, and I didn't get to participate.
Was it a pretty bad riot?
It was. Yeah, well, they got it pretty bad because
right.
They only had like a little section.
Right.
I think when they got mad because something happened and they couldn't play handball. They couldn't do nothing really. They just had like a little section, and they were trying to like push up and they said, you know what, these guys are hands off, but if they act up, you know what I mean?
Right.
By all means. And that happened, and I was a porter, I remember, and the alarm went off. And then I was short to the house, and we were on lockdown. I went home on lockdown, I remember.
And you know, I hear like a lot of guys talk about the riots between the Hispanics and the blacks in prison and how bad it is, but they actually don't know that you got the beef with the